Here's some of the topics you've been talking about in your competing radio show that you've frauded into being comparable or compatible. But please, they are. Go ahead,
I'm in Detroit. I just got back from Lansing a little while ago. I'm going to East Tawas tomorrow morning, but back at home in Detroit for tonight.
Jamie is the road warrior.
Yeah.
Yep.
You are traveling a lot.
On the show, we discussed, of course, Michael Thompson. Tuesday was the day of the hearing. I sat in on it, listened to it. Rick Thompson, Mike McCurdy, who's the head of the Cannabis Caucus, and Ryan Basor all spoke. And all of them were on the show talking about that experience. And it was very, very positive and looks good, we all think. And we also talked about Richard DeLisi, who was in the Florida state prison system for 33 years, and will be released in time to be home for Christmas, to be with his daughter for Christmas.
Interesting. I have a perspective on this. I realize that at the end of the day, it's happy news. But I mean, obviously, any person that's spent 30 years in prison over marijuana is hard to look past that as anything happy about it. Also, the Michael Thompson situation to me is, I don't know. I realize that he's become kind of the poster child of all that's wrong with cannabis criminalization. But there's so many other people that have been effectuated by the prohibition of cannabis at so many other levels, and the idea that the most extreme of them, which is his sentence to prison, the fact that he's still in there, is the only one that gets any attention, albeit important, and you get to start one at a time, just kind of puts a bad taste in my mouth in terms of what was expected to happen after legalization and really the limitations that have really the limited, and this is really the limited amount of progress at all. And I'm not knocking the efforts of those that were involved. I don't want to take anything away from them. But at the end of the day, Jimmy, correct me if I'm wrong, this was a parole board hearing. He was before the parole board. So he was, whether any one of the groups were going to be involved or not, the parole board, as they had in years past, they were going to review whether or not he had met the criteria of his sentence.
This wasn't just like a regular scheduled one. It was scheduled in part in order to set up the clemency decision for the governor. It was created because of a lot of the activism that went on.
Well, the decision that's going to be made is going to be made by the parole board. No other agency. Yeah. I mean, the parole board acts on behalf of the governor. They're going to decide. For example,
the parole board will make a recommendation, and the governor, regardless of what that recommendation is, will make a decision whether or not to grant clemency. That's how I understand it.
Okay. Anyways, it is. It's still not. It's still discretionary, of course, and it's amazing to me that all this effort had to be done just to get to this particular juncture. I would have suggested that a much easier path would have been created by executive authority and/or some other way, which many exist.
That would get a lot of people out at once. Some criteria.
Sure.
Covered a lot of ground of cannabis-related things that turned into ridiculous amounts of time. And
for sure. And I realize that, you would think that some of the activism that is necessary, some of the social justice issues that need to be addressed, they could get some of the energy and effort and focus as opposed to something that's just so extreme that should have been an automatic. When someone hears about Michael Thompson, they're appalled. And anyone that, favors tax and regulate any kind of regulatory system or legalization, you have half a conscience, you're going to feel the same way, and that should, not a lot of people disagree. It shouldn't be that controversial. You know what I mean? It's a big deal. I guess the big deal and the success of the, carrying it over is obviously something to cheer about, but also represents the lack of progress, I would say. But I'm not trying to take anything away from that group. Jamie, don't misunderstand me. It's more of a criticism of, the lack of leadership from the rest of the way down. But
this would affect this would affect more than cannabis people, though. I mean, people convicted of cannabis crimes. If I recall correctly, Mr. Thompson is actually in prison today as a result of gun charges that were related to the underlying felony of his marijuana crimes.
The old felony firearm.
Combination.
And I think
That's all true.
I think that's a bigger issue, and I think
would-
that Pete, we need to have a serious discussion in this country about things like minimum mandatory sentences and how they are not a good thing for society.
Well, and the reality is the small amount of cannabis that he was caught with, which led to the further investigation, which found these guns that were in a box in his closet that weren't, directly related to the cannabis activity at all, was part of the issue. At one point, he had an agreement for a 2-year sentence. The judge threw all that out and got the sentence that he has now. That 25 years later,
It's crazy.
we're trying to get him out.
Unreal.
And he was working at Delphi regularly. He worked with a bunch of young people and gangs to bring a bunch of people together to work with city officials for them to give up their guns and stuff like that and to get jobs. And they, working in conjunction with the mayor and some others, they found all these people jobs and broke down like this pattern of just bad behavior by a bunch of young people in the city, and instead help them to take another path. That was brought up. And one thing I didn't know either, he is the uncle of current mayor of Flint, Sheldon Neely.
Yeah, I just read that today.
Former state house representative who has introduced a couple of really good expungement bills that didn't go anywhere, but were in spirit the right idea. Much better than some of the stuff as far as cannabis goes that was passed recently.
Fascinating.
It is fascinating.